The Galactic Council, a powerful alliance of advanced alien species, had maintained its dominance over the galaxy for centuries. With an army of fleets that patrolled every star system and a collective knowledge that far surpassed anything any single species could achieve, the Council was confident in its unchallenged rule. Every planet, every system, every colony bowed to the laws they set, ensuring that peace and order, at least in the Council's eyes, reigned across the galaxy. But as the years passed, whispers began to spread about a distant, unknown world at the far edge of the galaxy. Rumors of a primitive species, barely capable of interplanetary travel, had been nothing more than a footnote in the vast archives of the Galactic Council. For centuries, the Council paid little attention to the so-called human species, dismissing them as insignificant. Then, everything changed. A strange signal arrived from this far-flung world, its origin traced to a previously uncharted sector. The Council was initially skeptical, but after closer inspection, they realized that this was no ordinary transmission. It was coded, sophisticated, and far more advanced than anything the Council had expected from a species believed to be in its infancy. It was a message from the humans, though the Council could not make sense of its contents. In a rare moment of uncertainty, the Council agreed to send a fleet, an ambassadorial delegation, to meet with this new species. When the fleet arrived in the human sector, their expectations were shattered. Instead of a fragile, unarmed race, they encountered a force that took them completely by surprise. The human ships that appeared on the Council's sensors were sleek, efficient, and surprisingly fast. They moved through the vast expanse of space with a grace that defied logic. The technology on display seemed to break every known law of physics the Council had studied for millennia. The ships were not only faster than any vessel the Council had ever built, but they were also equipped with energy shields that could absorb and deflect the most advanced weaponry the Council possessed. The Council's diplomats prepared to open a communication channel, confident that their years of experience would allow them to easily handle this primitive species. But what they didn't expect was the response they received. Instead of receiving a respectful greeting, or even the typical awe expected, from lesser civilizations they were met with confusion, and worse, amusement. The humans' ship AI, an entity that operated with an intellect and speed far beyond anything the Council had encountered, analyzed the Council's transmission and seemed to laugh. The laughter wasn't a simple error or malfunction. It was deliberate. The humans' response to the Council's first diplomatic transmission was met with a chilling ease. The language used wasn't one of deference or fear, but of curiosity mixed with an unmistakable undercurrent of mockery. The AI, speaking in a calm yet somewhat amused tone, addressed the Council's representatives directly. "We've been watching you for some time now. Your ways are interesting, but quite outdated. You've been living under the illusion of control for so long that you've forgotten what it means to truly adapt, to truly innovate." The Galactic Council's diplomats, long accustomed to having their authority respected, were taken aback. How could these humans, who had only just begun exploring space, speak to them as equals, or worse, as if they were beneath them? The humans, with their dazzling technology and cool confidence, had managed to flip the tables in a way that was impossible to ignore. It was as though the entire galaxy had been watching a play, and suddenly the stage had been overturned, with the most unexpected players taking center stage. The Council leaders struggled to maintain composure as the humans continued their conversation. There was no sense of fear or hesitation from the human representatives. Instead, they seemed amused at the Council's arrogance. "Do you think your fleets and armies can intimidate us?" one human commander said with a smirk, as though the idea was laughable. "We've survived worse, and we're not interested in your old power games. We want something different." This response, simple but dripping with audacity, rattled the Council's members. What had they been so certain about? That The humans were nothing but a footnote in the galaxy's grand story? That they could be easily manipulated and controlled? The laughter, the easy confidence, everything about this encounter went against every belief they had held for eons. The first contact wasn't going according to any of the plans they had prepared. In fact, it was as if the entire encounter was a test they hadn't studied for, and one they were quickly failing. The Galactic Council had never known humiliation until now. After the unexpected encounter with the humans, the Council's pride stood shattered like broken glass. They had ruled the stars for thousands of years, secure in the belief that no species could match their intelligence, power, or technological strength. But one meeting with the humans was enough to make them question everything. The Council, still trying to understand what had gone wrong, decided to escalate their approach. They sent their most experienced diplomats, their most brilliant scientists, and the sharpest military tacticians from across the galaxy to the human flagship, hoping to uncover a weakness or at least understand the nature of this unexpected threat. As the Council's grand delegation approached the enormous human vessel, they expected to find a clever trick, some illusion hiding the humans' true, weaker nature. But what they found was far worse for their pride. The human ship was not only real, but it also surpassed every technological benchmark the Council had ever known. The surface of the ship was smooth, seamless, and shimmered like liquid metal. Its energy readings made no sense. Its engines didn't use standard fuel, and its systems operated in ways the Council's scientists couldn't even begin to analyze. It was as if the ship itself was alive, adapting and changing even as it was being observed. Inside the ship, things were even more unsettling. The humans welcomed the delegation without fear, without the slightest show of intimidation. There was no excessive formality, no false politeness, only calm confidence, as if the humans were fully aware that they held every advantage. In a private chamber, one of the human commanders, Commander Lin, met with the Council's representatives. She was calm, composed, and spoke in simple terms, yet every word carried the weight of 1,000 victories. "We were once small," she began, her voice steady, "confined to a single world, with barely the means to reach our moon. We had conflicts, setbacks, and near-extinction events. We were not perfect, but we never stopped trying." The Council members listened in silence, some skeptical, others growing more uneasy with every passing second. Lin continued, explaining how humanity had survived despite endless challenges, how they had learned, adapted, and evolved faster than any species ever recorded. She told them about how their people turned every failure into fuel for progress, how their scientists broke barriers thought impossible, and how their people united not through control, but through a shared will to improve. "You thought we were behind," she said, almost smiling. "But while you were watching stars, we were building futures." The Council's scientists tried to question her, bringing up known theories of physics and interstellar law, only to be gently corrected, or simply stared at in silence as their questions dissolved into irrelevance. The humans had long surpassed those theories. Their ships ran entirely on renewable energy, drawing power from the void itself, something the Council had only dreamed of. Their materials couldn't be analyzed by the Council's scanning tools, because those materials didn't exist in the known periodic table. One Council engineer quietly admitted to himself that the human ship shouldn't even be able to fly, and yet it had crossed half the galaxy in less time than it took a Council cruiser to travel between two systems. And the most terrifying part wasn't the technology. It was the humans' attitude. They didn't want to conquer or destroy. They weren't seeking revenge or tribute. They had no interest in the Council's titles or power. Instead, they looked at the Galactic Council with a kind of amused disappointment, as if watching an old ruler try to command a world that had already moved on. The Council had built its power on fear, on control, on structure. Humanity had built its strength on adaptability, unity, and relentless curiosity. As the meeting ended, the human commander left the Council with a quiet warning. "We're not here to follow your rules. We're here to write new ones. If you want to understand us, you'll have to let go of what you think you know." With those words, the delegation was escorted back to their ship, silent and shaken. They had come expecting to teach a lesson to a younger race. Instead, they had been given a lesson in humility, one they would not soon forget. And somewhere deep in the Council's core, a new fear began to grow. What if humanity wasn't just different, but better? The Galactic Council, long known for its unshakable authority, had never faced such a challenge to its dominance. After their failed diplomatic approach and the humiliating encounter aboard the human flagship, whispers of doubt began to echo within the great halls of the Council. Pride wounded and reputation at stake, the Council decided it was time to remind the galaxy why they had ruled for so long. In a swift decision, they gathered a powerful fleet, one that had never been defeated, made up of warships from the Council's most militarized species. These colossal vessels, armed with devastating energy weapons and supported by squadrons of elite fighters, were built for one purpose: total destruction. The mission was simple: intimidate, overwhelm, and if necessary, eliminate the human threat. To the Council, this was a show of strength. To the humans, it was a mistake. As the fleet moved through space with a thunderous presence, the Council's leaders watched with confidence, convinced that the humans would finally realize their place. But the moment their ships arrived in the human-controlled sector, that confidence began to crumble. Instead of fear or panic, the humans met the Council's approach with silence, and then movement. Human ships emerged not with overwhelming numbers, but with precision. Their vessels did not roar or shine with bright energy like the Council's. They moved like shadows across the stars, shifting and bending light as if space itself obeyed their design. The first strike came not from the Council, but from the humans. One of the Council's lead dreadnoughts, a ship so massive it had once destroyed a moon in a single blast, lost control and spun helplessly in space, its systems confused by an invisible signal. Before the Council's crews could react, 3 more ships suffered similar fates, weapons offline, engines malfunctioning. No fire, no explosion, just silence and chaos. When the Council finally managed to fire their powerful energy beams, the human ships didn't even flinch. The beams hit, but nothing happened. The energy either vanished on impact or was absorbed into glowing shields that shimmered for only a second before returning to normal. One alien commander, panicked and confused, demanded an explanation, shouting into the comms, "Why are our weapons doing nothing?" There was no answer, only a quiet voice from the human flagship. "Is this the best you have?" the human commander said, her voice calm but laced with amusement. "We thought the Galactic Council was supposed to be more intimidating." The line, heard across open frequencies, echoed like thunder in every Council ship. It wasn't just taunting, it was a declaration. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't outnumbered. And worst of all, they were holding back. As the battle continued, human ships began to vanish and reappear at will, using a form of movement the Council had never seen. No warp signatures, no energy trails, just instant disappearance, followed by precise re-entry on the battlefield. They moved like they were part of space itself. One by one, the Council's ships were disabled, not destroyed, but left floating, powerless, drifting in silence. It became clear the humans weren't just trying to win, they were making a point. The battle that was supposed to re-establish the Council's dominance ended in retreat. The once proud fleet limped away, systems damaged, communication scrambled, and morale broken. Behind them, not a single human ship had been lost. Not one. The Council's leaders sat in stunned silence, unable to understand how their greatest force had been defeated without a single fatal strike. The humans hadn't needed to destroy them. They had simply outclassed them in every possible way. And as word of the defeat spread, something changed in the galaxy. Species who had lived in fear of the Council began to whisper new names in their conversations. Not with fear, but with curiosity. Humanity had arrived, not with demands or war, but with undeniable strength. The Council had tried to strike back. They had brought their best. But now, all they could do was face the truth. They had failed. The Galactic Council, humiliated and disoriented after their failed military display, found themselves in unfamiliar territory, a place where their centuries-old authority no longer inspired fear, but questions. As they tried to recover their image and reassert their influence, a quiet realization began to spread among the more observant members. Humanity's true power was not in its technology, but in the mindset behind it. Every effort to intimidate or outsmart the humans had failed, not because of superior firepower alone, but because the humans simply refused to break. They had a different way of thinking, relentless, creative, and unshaken, even when outnumbered or unwelcomed. It wasn't just their advanced ships or impossible energy systems that made them a threat. It was the spirit behind those creations, the collective will of a species that had spent generations clawing its way through chaos and still managed to build something beautiful. The humans had survived world wars, global pandemics, natural disasters, economic collapses, and still pushed forward with a confidence that no alien civilization could fully comprehend. Their cultures were different, sometimes even contradictory, but they all shared one trait, a burning belief that things could always be better, and that they could make it so. The Council, made up of species that had long lived in comfort and routine, began to see the vast difference. They had grown stable, yes, but also stagnant. They had built grand cities and fast ships, but they had not changed in centuries. The humans, on the other hand, thrived on change. They didn't fear failure. They studied it, learned from it, and turned it into their next success. Their technology reflected that same resilience. Ships that healed themselves, systems that evolved mid-battle, weapons that could shift form depending on need. But beneath all that steel and science was something more powerful, the ability to adapt, to unify under pressure, to dream bigger than anyone else. This truth was undeniable. A special session of the Galactic Council was called to discuss humanity's role in the galaxy. Leaders from across the stars gathered, many still unwilling to fully accept that a once-ignored species from a distant blue planet had risen to become the most influential force in known space. As the Council debated, humanity made its position clear. They did not arrive to submit, and they had no intention of begging for a seat. Instead, they offered something unexpected, a partnership. Through a simple but bold message, human representatives proposed a new kind of agreement. They would offer their knowledge, their technology, and their strategic insights, but only if they were given a voice in the decisions that shaped the galaxy. They would not be silent allies or background advisors. If the galaxy was to move forward, it had to move together. Many council members were shocked by the offer. To some, it felt like another challenge to their pride. To others, it was a chance to escape the old ways. Behind closed doors, debates turned into arguments. Some feared losing their grip on power, while others quietly admitted that perhaps it was time for a change. What unsettled the council most wasn't the humans' demands. It was the growing support they had from other species. Smaller civilizations, long ignored or controlled by the council, began to look to the humans as a symbol of hope. They had seen humanity's strength, but also their fairness. They had watched as humans offered aid without expectation, shared technology without judgment, and treated every ally as an equal. Influence, the kind that couldn't be forced or bought, was beginning to shift. The council still hesitated, caught between the old world they built and the new one being offered. But they could feel the weight of history beginning to tip. the Saki. Humans were not invaders. They were builders, and they were already shaping the future, with or without permission. The Council could either resist and fall behind, or adapt and become part of something greater. In that quiet but powerful moment, many began to see the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their machines or even their intelligence. It was their indomitable will to rise, to rebuild, and to reach for something beyond survival. Something better. And the galaxy was watching. The once mighty Galactic Council, shaken by repeated failures to intimidate or outmaneuver the human race, found itself standing at the edge of a decision that would shape the galaxy's future. For thousands of years, they had ruled through control, their power undisputed, and their laws unquestioned. But now, their old system, built on fear and forced order, was breaking apart. Humanity's rise had changed everything. Not through war or invasion, but through sheer brilliance, relentless innovation, and a refusal to play by the galaxy's old rules. The humans had proven again and again that they were not only capable of standing equal to the Council, but far beyond them in many ways. Their ships moved through space like threads of light, their systems ran on clean and endless energy, and their minds approached diplomacy with logic and compassion in perfect balance. Faced with this new power, the Council's leaders held one, last summit, a gathering unlike any before. It was no longer about keeping control, it was about survival. Members of once proud species argued among themselves. Some still wanted to resist, clinging to old pride. But others, especially the younger voices, spoke with hope, suggesting that humanity was not the threat they feared, but the guide they needed. Meanwhile, humanity made its position clear. They did not come to conquer. They had no interest in thrones or titles. Instead, they proposed a new kind of alliance, one that would break the rigid hierarchy of the old Council and replace it with a coalition of free, equal species. In this vision, no race would be forced into submission, no system ruled by fear. Every voice would matter, and progress would be shared. It was a bold vision, and one the galaxy had never seen before. At first, the Council hesitated, unsure if such a change was even possible. But as they watched the way humanity worked with smaller, weaker species, offering them technology, training, and respect, they began to understand something deeper. The true strength of humans was not only their science, but their spirit. They uplifted others, saw value where others saw weakness, and believed in unity more than dominance. Slowly, the resistance among the Council began to fade. A vote was called, one that would decide the future of the galaxy. And in a moment that would be remembered for centuries, the Galactic Council extended an invitation to humanity, not as subjects, not as allies, but as equals. Humanity accepted, but they had one clear condition: that this new alliance would respect the rights of every species, big or small, and that no one would ever be forced into obedience again. It was not a demand of power, it was a promise of peace. The Council agreed, and with that, a new era began. Across the stars, the news spread like wildfire. The old empire of control had ended, and in its place rose something entirely new: a galactic coalition based on cooperation, shared knowledge, and the unbreakable belief that together, all species could thrive. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists to build advanced cities on forgotten worlds. Human diplomats helped end wars that had lasted for generations. Trade, education, and exploration flourished like never before. Where there had once been fear, there was now hope. The galaxy changed, not with a final battle, but with a final choice: the choice to grow, to listen, and to believe in a better way. And at the center of it all was humanity, the once overlooked species from a small blue planet, who had laughed in the face of the greatest empire in the galaxy and walked forward, not to rule, but to lead. The stars would remember this moment, not as the end of the old Council, but as the birth of something greater. It was not just a victory for humans, but for every species that dared to dream beyond their limits. In the silent depths of space, a new light had been born. And it all began with a single unexpected laugh.